All right, we're here on Tuesday morning at 10:15 on
May 1st.
May 1st, and with my uncle Ed, and we're going to ask him some questions about his life, and he has so many fascinating stories to tell, and a lot of inspiring things that he's seen and gone through, and so we'll start off from the beginning. If that's all right. You want to talk a little bit about where you were born and things like that?
Sure. I was born in Michigan, Pontiac, which is an industrial town, home of the Pontiac automobile. Back in 1930, which was the start of the Great Depression. So I grew up in the Depression years in an industrial town, which was not the best of life. I graduated from high school December of 1946 at the age of 16, and 2 weeks later I was in the Army. I spent about 20 months in the Army Air Corps and was in the service when it became the United States Air Force. I was involved in an airplane crash in 1948, spring of 48, on a return flight from Alaska, and was medically discharged September of 1948. Returned to Michigan, went to college, and when my old outfit was moving to Japan, I re-enlisted in the Air Force and went to Japan with them. I arrived in Japan, I think January 3rd, 1950, the day before the 4th, and flew my first bombing mission on Independence Day, 1950. Basically, I was in a bomber squadron. I was a gunner, I was navigator, I was a little bit of everything, bombardier, whatever job was needed in the plane at that time. We flew ground support missions, low level missions supporting the ground troops. We also one of our main missions were to blow up railroad tracks and bridges, tanks, armored columns, that sort of thing. I flew missions until the end of February of 1951 and returned to the States in March of 1951. So where do we go from there? What do you want to know?
All right. Well, here we go. Can you tell us a little bit about your parents growing up?
Oh, my dad worked for the automotive industry, in the automotive industry. Of course, when I was growing up, there was no automotive industry, or very few people working. So my dad worked the WPA, digging ditches and putting in sewer lines and that sort of thing, until the factory started back to work, which was about 37, 38, because we were starting to sell equipment to England and France as they were preparing for World War II. So from then on, he either worked in the automotive industry or the aircraft industry.
Okay.
He was a tool and die maker by trade. My mom was a homemaker. She worked as a cleaning lady, cleaning offices and cleaned the local theater. So that's the kind of life. Everybody did something. When World War II broke out, of course, everybody prospered. I can remember I was 11 years and 8 days old on December 7th, 1941, and was playing football in the front yard. And snowing. When my dad came out and said that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. So that kind of changed everybody's life for the next 5 or 6 years. I mean, all we could think of was defeating the Nazis in Europe and the Japanese in the Pacific. It was a time of rationing, food stamps, it just, but everybody wore bonds, and that, but everybody kind of pulled together. It was, nobody complained about anything. I mean, you got some gripes about, okay, you couldn't get butter, so you had to use margarine. Gasoline was rationed, not because we had a shortage of gasoline, but because we had a shortage of tires. There were no civilian automobiles built from late 1941 to 1946. There were every automobile that was built went to the military, and assembly lines were either producing trucks or jeeps, and very few sedans, and that is what was absolutely needed by the military and by business. So it was a different time. I kind of segregate my life into segments. There was the Depression. There was the war, World War II. There was my school years, and then there was the Korean War, and then there was my civilian life after that as an engineer, and then in one period of my life I decided that I didn't want to be an engineer anymore, and I wanted to live in California, so I got into sales, and that was in 1971. So I moved out here to California and have been a salesman ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where was your mom from? Where was her family from? Her parents and her grandparents?
Well, my mom was born and raised in Michigan. Her dad was French and Indian. He was born and raised in Michigan.
What was his name?
Howlett, Palmer Howlett. He was a farmer. His wife died in childbirth of their 8th child, I think. And they lost 3 of the kids to the plague, the Black Plague back in the 1900s. But he raised the balance of the kids, 5 or 6 kids, I can't remember which, by himself on the farm. And he was a paradox. He was a hard-nosed farmer, but he was a good Christian. He built the community church in Big Beaver, Michigan, and it's still standing as a historical building in Michigan. He had 2 boys, no, 3 boys, Sam, Pete, and Bill, and the 4 girls. Yeah, 4 girls, so he raised 7, come to think of it. I mean, most of the family, my family, are back in Michigan, or in that general area. My dad's family were from Canada. Well, a little bit on my mom's family. There's Iroquois and Indian blood somewhere along the line. My mom always said we weren't Indian, and my grandfather always said we were. So, but if you ever saw a picture of my grandfather, he looks like an Indian.
Yeah.
My dad's family were from London, Ontario, Canada. My dad was born in Michigan. My dad's father was Canadian by birth. His family were bit strange. My grandfather was a bootlegger during Prohibition, running whiskey across the Detroit River. My dad drove a truck delivering the bootleg whiskey to taverns and so on throughout southern Michigan. So, I mean, that was kind of their background. I don't know, I still don't know how my dad and mom ever got together, but they did. And
Yeah.
had 5 kids, so
Oh, so you had 4 brothers and sisters?
I got 1 brother and 3 sisters.
Okay. And what's the order and all that?
My one sister's older, I'm the second, then another sister, then my brother, and then the youngest sister. So they're all still alive,
Oh, wow.
and they all live in Michigan, in the
Wow.
not in the Upper Peninsula, but the upper part of the Lower Peninsula.
Wow. Did you
and-
say you were the oldest of all them?
No, my sister's the oldest.
Okay.
At least she used to be the oldest. I think I have surpassed her in age, according to her.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so, but they've all got families, and boy, I don't know, I mean, it's just spread out.
How many nieces and nephews do you have from those siblings of yours?
Let me see, I've got 6 siblings, 6 nieces and nephews. All nieces, no nephews.
Oh, wow.
My son, Jeff, was the only boy
Oh, okay.
from, the only grandson my parents had.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
And what was the last name's Burling, right?
yeah,
And your dad's parents, what was their last name was Burling?
yeah,
And your mom's parents, their last name was Howlett?
Howlett.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
How about your mom's mom? What was their last name?
Oh,
Maiden name, you know?
I can't, I really don't know.
Yeah.
My sister started a
Family tree.
family tree, and she keeps telling me she's gonna send it to me, and she hasn't. And,
That's cool.
and I think about some of my ancestors, and I don't really know if I wanna know about them.
Yeah. Yeah. There might be some good stories, bad stories.
Yeah.
So some of them come from
Well,
Canada,
yeah,
Indian, and France.
Yeah,
And
my, if I trace back my mom's parents, or my mom's family, they were French.
French.
And immigrated to Canada. So they were basically the French fur trappers and
Right.
that type. My dad's family came from Burlington, England,
Oh.
and there were 3 brothers. And the story that I always got was that they were run out of town. Back in the 1800s, the English took their convicts and the malcontents and the people they didn't want and sent them to the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know just when they came over, but the 3 brothers were shipped over to the colonies. And I don't know if their name was Burling
Mm-hmm.
or because they came from Burlington, England, that's what was on the immigration papers.
That's
when
interesting.
they passed through
Yeah.
immigration. One brother stayed in New England. One brother went to Canada, and he's basically the one that my parents went lineage. And then one brother went out to Iowa, which is now Iowa. It was the territories back then.
Oh, okay.
But the funny part about it, I got out of the service in '55 and went to work for an engineering company in Chicago. And one of our competitors, one of their engineers, was named Burling also.
Hmm.
And he and I got together one time, and in fact, that company bought us out. But we got talking, and we found out that we were distant relatives.
Wow.
So,
That's
and he was from the Iowa side of the family.
okay. Oh, okay. That's so crazy.
But it's the only non-family Burling I've ever met.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but
yeah, there's a lot more out there.
yeah, that's interesting. So I know we're kind of going all over the place,
Okay.
but that's my fault. I mean, that's fine though. We can just.
You can,
I'll
you
keep.
can edit it out.
No, we don't have to edit. I don't mind at all. I'll keep asking questions
Okay.
all over the place. It'll keep people interested when they watch. So when were you born? What date? What was the date?
November 29th, 1930.
Oh wow.
So
November
I'm
29th.
81 years old now.
Almost 82,
I'll
82
be
in
82
November.
in
Wow, that's awesome. You're still going strong. So what kinds of things do you remember doing for fun when you were growing up as a?
Oh, I mean, there was no organized sports. I
Mhm.
mean, there was no little league, no Pop Warner football league or anything else. So the neighborhood kids, we just got our own. We played football in the fall and baseball in the spring, but we usually played in a vacant lot or in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, we went sledding and tobogganing, a lot of snow. We went ice skating. The lakes froze over, and we all went ice skating. We played hockey. We'd clear off the snow off the ice on the lake and play hockey. I ran a trap line when I was a kid.
What's that?
A trap line, muskrat and beaver and mink, and sold the furs. So I used to get up like 4 in the morning
Mhm.
and go walk my trap line, or depending on which line I was running, and sometimes I skated, and then bring back whatever I had trapped, and go to school, and then come back and after school and skin them out, and stretch the skins and dry them out, and then ship them to the dealer, and it was extra money. That's how I made money.
It's amazing. Something that really impresses me whenever I talk to people around from your generation. I was reading Grammy's dad's biography that he wrote. You know, Grandpa Dallas.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how he used to do a lot of things like that too. I'm really impressed with how hard you worked. I mean, because I feel like today, a lot of people are more interested in leisure time and
Yeah.
things like that, including myself too. That's something I'm trying to work on. But I really admire how many long hours and hard hours of work people of your generation put in.
Well, in 42, okay, I was 11 years old. The war was rolling pretty good, and all the young guys, the 18, 19, 17, 18, 19-year-old guys were gone. They were all enlisting in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job in the summertime as a caddy at a country club called Orchard Lake Country Club. And so I caddied, all summer long, caddying on the weekends during the school year, and then on Saturday and Sunday. And then during the summer, I was out there every day caddying. Sometimes we would do 18 holes, sometimes we'd do 36, sometimes we'd do 54.
Mm-hmm.
And as the war wore on, and there was less and less caddies, we used to carry double. So you carried 2 bags for 54 holes.
Oh, wow.
And you gotta remember, when I graduated from high school, I was 5 foot tall and weighed 97 pounds.
Really?
Yeah. I had to eat 5 pounds bananas on the bus going down to Detroit so I could pass the weight limit to get into service.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You had to weigh over 100 pounds.
That's hilarious.
So I mean, you can imagine a kid I was probably 4'6", probably weighed 80 pounds, carrying 2 golf bags for 54 holes. We used to get $5 a round, or $5 a bag. So if you carried double, you got $10.
It's pretty good. Is it pretty good, huh?
That was pretty good. So I mean, I could on a weekend, I could make $40 or $50. and depending on the tips and everything else. So, I mean, it was just, I used to make enough money in the summertime to keep me in spending money throughout the winter. That
That's
was
pretty
all,
cool.
So.
What do you remember from school? Any teachers or anything from school you
No,
remember?
I mean,
Elementary school, middle school, high school?
About, high school was, you know, it was just school to me.
Yeah.
The only teacher I really remember, well, two educators. I had a fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Jacobson,
Mm-hmm.
that got me interested in art and drawing and that. And she just, I mean, she was just a gem. She was a teacher in the true spirit of the world, in that she took an interest in all her kids.
Mm-hmm.
My sister had her before I did, and you know, my two sisters and my brother after me had the same teacher, and we all remember her fondly.
That's cool.
And then there was the principal, Mrs. Odell, who was one tough old bird, but she ran her school well. She took an interest in the kids, and I mean, this was still, when I started grade school, this was still the height of the Depression. I mean, we hadn't started the war years yet. So none of the kids really had a lot of money. We all walked to school. We didn't have buses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you walked in the summertime, you walked in the springtime, you walked in the fall, and you walked in the winter. And it didn't matter if it was, you know, snowing, and it didn't matter if it was below zero. You still walked to school and you got there.
Yeah.
But she used to take care. She, you know, made sure that any welfare programs, like fresh milk and everything else, if it was available, she got it for her schools and for her kids. So.
That's cool. And why'd you graduate when you were 16? Did most people graduate when they were 18?
Yeah. And back in those days, there used to be 2 graduating classes.
Mm-hmm.
You graduated either in December or June.
Mm.
Well, someplace along the line, and I was in grade school, I didn't go to kindergarten. I started in the 1st grade, so I was ahead. And then I skipped a grade from the 2nd to the 4th. I didn't do the 3rd. So I was actually, you know, basically almost like a year and a half or 2 years ahead of my peers.
Oh, cool.
So high school was good. The only sports I was big enough to play were golf
Mm-hmm.
and swimming.
Mm-hmm.
So I played on the golf team, and I swam on the swimming team. I wasn't the world's greatest swimmer or anything else. I didn't earn any medals or anything else. I was a pretty good golfer though.
Mm-hmm.
In junior golf, let me see, I was what, 14 or 15, 14 and 15. I came in 2nd place in the state championship.
Wow.
There was just a guy that just could beat my pants off, that was all.
Yeah.
And I don't remember his name. But, you know, the only reason I played golf is because I caddied.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, you know, that's how I learned. First golf club I got was a 5-iron. And one of the members, his name was Doc Aarons, he was president of Cadillac Corporation, gave it to me.
That's cool.
And that's how I learned to play golf. I played golf with a 5-iron.
That's awesome. So, tell me a little bit more about the Korean War. So, why did you want to go into the military first of all?
Well, to get out of town.
Get out of town.
It was a way to get an education. I couldn't afford college.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm 16 years old, and you know, I could either go to work in the automotive plants or anything else. But I just wanted to get out of town. My mom always told me, she said, when you grow up, don't stay in Michigan and don't work for the automotive industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the opportunity, I forged my birth certificate to say I was 18, and ran away from home, joined the Army. And it was just, it was a way to get an education, it was a way to learn something.
Yeah.
It was you know, three squares and a roof over your head.
Yeah.
It was just, it was an improvement on what I had.
Yeah. Did you get in contact with your parents later on
Oh, yeah.
after you ran away?
I was in basic training. I think I'd been away 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally wrote my mom a letter. My dad wanted me to get out of the service, not because he wanted me home, just because I wanted to be in the service and he didn't want me to have anything I wanted. So
I gotcha.
it was just one of those things.
Yeah.
But my commanding officer allowed me to stay in, and I did.
That's cool.
I went through my basic training. I took basic training. Actually, I was in the Army, United States Army Air Corps.
Mm-hmm.
But my basic trainers were Marines.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was a transition between the Army and what we now know as the United States Air Force. We weren't the Air Force yet.
Yeah.
So they were trying everything else. They had the Navy down there, they had the Marines down there, they had the regular Army basic, and then they had what they called Air Force basic, which was totally different. I was one of the lucky or unlucky ones, whatever you want to call it, but I took my basic from Marines, and it was tough.
Did you go through like Hell Week and all that?
Oh, yeah.
What kinds of things did you have to do?
We did, 20-mile hikes with 65-pound field packs. I was the smallest guy in the company. So they made me a BAR man, which is Browning automatic rifle, which is the largest weapon that the ground troops carry. So actually the weapon was almost as tall as I was. But that was what, that was just one of the things it did. And back then, the DIs, the drill instructors, they were tough. If you screwed up, you wore steel helmets. They'd take their bayonet and wrap you alongside of the helmet, and your ears would ring for 5 minutes. They just didn't take any guff. But by the time I got out of basic training, 13 weeks, I had gained about 20 pounds, and none of it fat, it was all muscle.
Wow.
And I had grown about 1.5 inches.
Mm.
So it was just basically because of all the exercise. I mean, I was pretty wiry and pretty tough, and I wasn't never fat. But it was just the exercise and the good food.
Mm-hmm.
That I just, sprung out. So, now I'm 5'8", so I didn't really start growing until I was, 18 years old. I think.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. You were telling me one time that they made you like hold your breath underwater for 3 minutes, or what was that?
Oh yeah. Well, no, that was scuba training.
Oh, scuba training.
Yeah. We were in Texas. We didn't do too much water work. But, they did nasty things like roll you out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and go out and do push-ups and set-ups and, for a couple of hours, or roll you out and take you on a nice 20-mile hike, and, then come back and you still had to put in a full day. But classes were good. I learned a lot. When I got out of basic, I had a choice of what I wanted to do, and I just wanted to fly. I was too young to get into pilot training, so I got into gunnery,
Mm-hmm.
and got assigned to a B-25 out there.
So then you entered in the Korean War, and you went on those bombing raids. Did you shoot guns, or did you drop bombs, or
Both. And you can look at our airplane there.
yeah?
because of my size, even back then, I fit into a tail gutter position real nice. So I was, a lot of times I was in the gun position, in the tail gun. But I also flew as a navigator, which is basically a co-pilot. I flew as a bombardier. But we were ground support, so we did a lot of strafing missions with the B-26 had 850 calibers in the nose, so we were a good strafing plane. And we had to carry a heck of a bomb load. We carried back then, a lot of napalm.
I've heard about that, yeah.
Yeah, so we would drop napalm on the hilltops, and the napalm would run down the hill, and the Koreans would, get out of their foxholes and their trenches, and then we'd go back through and do a strafing run. We also shot up a lot of tanks, a lot of locomotives, bombed a lot of railroad tracks.
Yeah.
But as fast as we could bomb them, they'd build them again.
Really?
So yeah. I mean, a couple of notes in there, I think. We'd bomb out a bridge, and we'd go back the next day, and the bridge would still look bombed out. But at night, they would put platforms, movable platforms over the bridge, so their troops and tanks and everything else could get across. And then in the morning, they would pull those off, so the bridge would still look like it was bombed out.
Oh, okay.
And a couple of bridges, they actually put like underwater, just like maybe a foot underwater, and then the trucks and that could drive across. But from the air, you really couldn't see it.
Wow, that's interesting.
So, but we'd catch them at night. We flew a lot of night missions. The B-29s flew during the day and bombing bridges and tracks. We flew at night, a lot of night missions. So we would catch them at night and find out where they were crossing at and take them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, the funny part about it, I learned more about the Korean War after I left Korea and came back to the States and started reading it, reading about it and listening to some of the other guys that came back and everything else. When you were over there, and I have to speak for myself, you were in your own little world.
Mm-hmm.
My world was a base in Japan, my airplane, and our targets, and that was it. Every once in a while you got a pass, and we would fly to Tokyo and party for a weekend. But that was your world. You didn't really know what was going on the whole scope of the war.
Mm-hmm.
All I know is I used to feel real sorry for the guys that were on the ground in Korea, and especially in the winter of 50-51, because it was cold. I mean, they had a lot of below zero weather, a lot of snow, and we would fly our mission and come back to the base, and we would have warm barracks and clean blankets and warm food and hot showers. And those guys, went for weeks and sometimes months without a hot shower. And if they got warm food once a week, they were lucky.
Yeah.
And they were being shot at all the time. Mm-hmm. We were being shot at while we were flying our missions, but that was, we didn't have to worry at night about somebody sneaking in and cutting our throats.
Right.
And they did. So that to me was a blessing as far as I was concerned. I wasn't doing that, but I really felt sorry for these guys.
Yeah.
I can still remember, we didn't have heaters in our planes. Back then warplanes weren't heated.
Mm-hmm.
We had fleece line flying suits, and you still froze your butt off. You know, it'd be 10 below zero ground temperature. You're flying at 200 miles an hour or 250 miles an hour, and you've got open hatches with guns sticking out of them. And the wind chill factor is enormous at that speed. And you know, you'd get back from the mission and you'd go stand in the shower for a half hour just to warm up. You know, some of the guys got frostbitten toes and hands and noses. We used to wear scarves, goggles, and everything else, trying to keep warm. But sometimes you just didn't. And you know, then there was always the fact that you would get back to the base and somebody else wouldn't. You know, you'd take off with 6 planes and 5 would come back. You know, and I saw a couple of them go down. And you know, luckily I didn't see a lot of them go down, but I saw a few, and it was always, you know, there's always an empty seat at the mess hall, or an empty stool at the bar or something, and it, you know, and you thought every time you took off, that could be you. You didn't let it bother you, but the thought was always in your head. You just did what you had to do and hope for the best, and you know, say a silent prayer, and if you made it back, that was great. I always made it back, so that was a godsend.
So did you ever get close to being shot at, or?
Oh yeah, we used to get shot at all the time. We used to take a lot of ground fire because we were flying, on the missions we were flying 200 feet off the deck. And the North Koreans would just lay on their backs and just shoot straight up in the air with automatic weapons. You know, it's small arms fire, but we used to come back with bullet holes in the fuselage all the time. And then they used to have anti-aircraft guns. And one of our jobs, our squadron's job, was to take out the anti-aircraft guns so that they wouldn't bother the B-29s.
Right.
So, I mean, that was always hairy. Because anti-aircraft guns are usually either 20 millimeter or 40 millimeter, and they punch holes in airplanes and take out engines and everything else.
Yeah.
So, but what we would do is we would set up I guess a decoy, and we'd send one plane in, and they would draw the anti-aircraft fire, and then we would come in behind them and take out the batteries, because we didn't know where they're at then.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So then we'd either use bombs, or a lot of times we used napalm, and just a lot of times we just strafed them. But what you never wanted to be was a decoy chip.
Yeah.
But everybody took turns.
Okay.
So.
How many planes were in your squadron?
We had 25.
25?
25 in the squadron. And that's squadron level is 25 ships.
How many people per plane?
Anywhere from 3 to 5, depending on how the plane was configured and what it was going to be doing. Some of them were just the pilot, the co-pilot, and the bombardier. The pilot could operate all the machine guns, including the turrets, from the cockpit if he wanted to. But most of the missions, we had a 5-man crew. And then, of course, you had ground personnel. You had probably 20 to 25 personnel per plane just to maintain it, keep it flying, and so on and so forth. Plus your refuelers, your armament guys, the ammo people, people that took care of your guns and everything else. So it was, you know, we had a good contingent of people there.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we also had, for a while, we had a Navy squadron on our base, Corsairs, and of course, they were totally separate. I mean, they brought in their own maintenance people and everything else. Funny part about it, you know, the one thing about airplanes, mechanics learn to work on a airplane, a type of airplane.
Uh-huh.
I don't care what it is, but that's their specialty. So they don't know crap about somebody else's airplane,
Mm-hmm.
a different type or anything else. So each squadron of different airplanes had their own mechanics. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a cross training back then. I mean, everybody was a specialist. So
And what did you operate? The machine guns or the?
I did. I was a gunner. That was my rating. My rating was as a gunner.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, you did whatever needed to be done. So if I wasn't flying with one ship and they needed the gunner on the other one, or they needed the navigator, or they needed the bombardier, then I would fill in on and do that. I was kind of like a floater.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't assigned to one plane constantly. I was the guy that could do a lot of things. And there was about 5 or 6 of us that way that were qualified to do a lot of different jobs. So we were fill-ins. If somebody was sick, we would take his place in the plane. We flew that way. Actually, we flew extra missions. They would not let us fly more than 3 missions a day, period. And that was it. I mean, you were limited to 3 missions, but, you know, each mission was 4 to 6 hours.
Oh, really?
So, you know, the time you took off, got over Korea, did whatever you're going to do, bomb missions or strafing missions or blow up a bridge or whatever you're going to do, and got back, it was anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. So if you flew 3 missions, you were flying 18 hours.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let you go beyond that. And they would try to keep it, you know, like maybe two 4 hours and 1 6. So you flew 14 hours. But then you could take a day off too.
Yeah.
So that usually if you flew 3 missions, you didn't fly all during the next day, but you may fly into the next night.
Yeah. Okay.